Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the One of Us podcast. I'm excited to chat with everyone and also hear guys' feedback and comments. We're going to be talking about modern ways to really slow down. So that's the premise of today, to slow down, but not only slow down, but to connect with the Lord, with community, and just in surrender through prayer. So we're just going to be chatting about ways that we've done that, and maybe we can encourage each other because, hey, I think we all need more slowing down. It's that hustle, that grind culture. Do you guys feel like you fall into that, or you've like rebelled against that culture?
I despise that culture. But I think sometimes when you just start working, like, because I know for me as a teacher, I have the summers to kind of just slow down and relax. But when work gets started up again, I kind of get more into that hustle bustle where I'm up at this time after work. I have this plan. And then after that, I have this plan. And then, it's a lot more scheduled, a lot more go, go, go. And there's not a whole lot of relaxation time until it's just those breaks. I don't really like it because it does kind of unnecessarily add stress sometimes or makes you feel like you don't have a whole lot of freedom. So when I do have those breaks or even on my Saturdays, I really try and take advantage of those days to just find that time to relax and restart for the week.
Yeah, I don't think anyone enjoys the grind culture. I think people just find themselves stuck in grind culture. I mean, how do you guys see yourself stuck in that grind culture today? Because I guess for me, something that I see myself doing a lot is like my to-do list is just always like 2 pages long. It's never shrunk. And I feel like I'm always like having that, I guess, I don't want to say anxiety, but that pressure to just keep chipping away at the to-do list, even if every day it grows and grows.
So recently, I found myself being better at it. I think maybe it had to do with the pressures of my last job. Because now, like, I look at my schedule and I plan for myself to slow down. Like, if I feel like I had a very busy or like long week, I give myself a week to kind of recover. And with work, I was open, with my new job about me rushing and wanting to get things done very quickly and saying, I'm going to actually take a step back and slow down to make sure that I'm still doing my work in a, timely manner, but efficiently.
I think too, it's so interesting because you see the life of Jesus and how he was absolutely not in a hurry at all at any point. Like, even to the point of like going to the cross, like, it's not my time yet, not my time yet. We see his relationship and his conversations with Mary and Martha, right? Like the busy sister, the, kind of grind sister versus the one that just wanted to sit in his presence. And it's so interesting how quickly we can fall into it and not even realize. I think too, like, productivity is tied to your worth nowadays. It's like a medal of honor to say that you're busy or that you have a lot going on. Like, even when you look online on social media, you see someone has a lot going on. You're like, dang, they're doing so much. They're doing this, and this. What am I doing? Watching Netflix. And so, yeah, I just think it's fascinating, but how important it is to slow down. So, what are moments, I guess, in your guys' faith journey where you're like, this is an environment where I feel fully rested in the presence of the Lord?
Well, I feel like outside of church, I always find that there's a specific, typically when we were lived in our apartment, there's always a specific space on the couch that just, I don't know what that seat did, but it gave me the most peace. But I feel like I never realized that point until I hit rock bottom. Because I feel like sometimes like it's easy to bottle everything in, and then for me it just always explodes in the form of like I'm just overwhelmed and have to just go sit down. But this one seat at our old couch, I don't know what it was, it always make me think about God, and I would just kind of like find peace sitting there. And I think that's kind of all we need to do is kind of like try to avoid getting overwhelmed by running to that, like, it's, Jesus even says, right, like pray in secret for your father sees you in secret. I know like a lot of people cliche it as the war room, whatever you want to call it, but I think every Christian should have that space, whether it's in the home, out the home, where they can really connect with God and find peace. And it shouldn't be something as a last resort. It should really be something that you fit into your schedule.
I think too, kind of on the same vein that you're talking about, Juan, in terms of like, quote unquote, the war room. I think too, if you look at God's relationship with the Israelites, like through Exodus, there are many times when the Lord just ask them to stand still and watch him rescue them. Like almost like that stillness is like a weapon, right? Just like the word of God is a double-edged sword. In the same way, I think being still can be a weapon against the enemy, because I think if the devil can't destroy you, he'll distract you. And so being still and like quieting your spirit, I think really allows the Lord to like penetrate through your heart.
So Juan said something earlier just about relaxation and taking your time and ways that Jesus was just wasn't in a rush. And it actually reminded me of Luke 8:22 through 25, where it's Jesus calms the storm. And it's actually probably one of my favorite stories in the Bible, but it goes, "One day Jesus said to his disciples, 'Let's cross to the other side of the lake.' So they got into a boat and started out. As they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap. But soon a fierce storm came down on the lake. The boat was filling with water, and they were in real danger. The disciples went and woke him up, shouting, 'Master, Master, we're going to drown.' When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and the raging waves. Suddenly the storm stopped and all was calm. Then he asked them, 'Where is your faith?' The disciples were terrified and amazed. 'Who is this man?' they asked each other. 'When he gives a command, even the wind and waves obey him.'" And the reason I wanted to share that is because I don't know, that's probably one of my favorite stories, or when I think of Jesus really just kind of taking a step back. He's not in a worry, like he's not in a hurry, he's not worried, not rush. I think of that story a lot where there's, and here's the thing, someone else also put that into perspective, is fishermen. They're used to some, crazy waves and stuff. So for the fishermen to really be freaking out, it must have been a whole nother level of extreme. And for Jesus just to be sleeping through it and not even worried and just honestly relaxing and resetting is, I think, one of my favorite stories.
I mean, I know this might be a pivot, but I think grind culture and being really hastily typically is because this in this culture we find it that being efficient is right? Like how much can you get out of every minute? And I feel like what that leads to is that a lot of Christians tend to do things a lot and then ask God to kind of tag along in the way. So what I like to say to people is like sometimes you need to stop and tell yourself, are you following God or are you asking God to follow you throughout your adventure in the day? Because I think there's this element where I think the devil wants us to exclude God in our day to day. I feel like God should be involved in all things, right? Not just before you eat and before bed. It should be in all decisions and in all things. I think a lot about Proverbs 19:2. It says, desire without knowledge is not good, and whoever makes haste his feet misses his way. And I think that's just a good word to remind us that we're always in a rush. And when you're in a rush, more often than not, you're making a haste decision. I feel like if you're making a decision, especially without maybe praying about it or seeking counsel, a lot of times it can be, a decision without God. And that's where I feel like a lot of Christians find themselves saying, like, I don't feel like I'm listening to the Lord or I can't hear God. Well, if you're not seeking to hear God, how can you ever hear him? So I think a good part in this rest, because I understand like recharging your batteries, like I think there should always be rest for that. But I think if you're resting without really seeking God, then you're not seeking direction at the same time.
Do you feel like the grind culture is even more like in Christians' lives because of the expectations of serving and then, like the whole church schedule?
Well, I think Crystal kind of hit on it, like with the whole Martha and like Mary situation. I do think, like, I mean, we've talked about it in a previous podcast where, should you just serve to serve? Because I understand that pressure from like certain churches have pressured people to just like always sign up, always do things. But I feel like if you're doing it with the wrong heart posture, then I do think you're doing things too hastily. You should always do things like in prayer. You know what I mean?
I'll just kind of add to that point is whose strength are you doing it out of? Juan and I have talked about this because there are a few people in the church that we really admire that are at every single event, work a full-time job, have all these other endeavors, responsibilities, family, husbands, wives, whatever that looks like, and they're on it and they're on top of it. And I'm always like, wow, like, how do they do that? Like, I want to be able to have time for all of the things and do all of the things. But I think what they're really good at, and I'm hoping to lean into, is doing it out of the Lord's strength, right? For Vic's favorite verse, right? If we're when I'm weak, then I'm strong. I think if the Lord is like supplementing our strength to be able to serve, then we are able to kind of do all the things and not burn out. Because you're serving God. I mean, what better thing is there to do? What better use of time?
Rest is just a great way to avoid, because I mean, think about it. Some of the most monumentous decisions that people have been made in a clear conscience, never in a rush. If anything, people who have made decisions in a rush, I feel like have always either regretted it or felt that like they missed out on something or some information. I think a lot about Hebrews 4:11, where God says, let us therefore strive to enter that rest so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. And what I like about this verse is like the rest that they're talking about is the rest with the Lord, because reading your word and being with God kind of resets your mind. We're such a forgetful people. I mean, some of us forget, what happened like 2 weeks ago. And I feel like we need that constant reminder every day, kind of that constant ministry towards ourselves and others, that we need to, stay the right course, to deny our flesh. Because when we're distracted in that way that Crystal's saying, being in a rush, to do list, laundry list upon laundry list, we find ourselves, I guess, penetrable by the evil one to do wrong.
And I don't know if anyone listening, or even you guys can relate to this, but I've literally never made a good decision out of haste or desperation. Like, whenever I feel like, okay, I just need to decide now, I just need to make a choice, like, it's never been a positive experience for me. But when I slow down and I'm like, you know what, I am going to choose to be still, I am going to choose to yield and pray over this decision, even if it may seem minuscule, even if it may seem like not that deep, but to really pray about everything and like be at a state of peace before making decisions, I think has always been rewarded in my life. So that's always encouragement to me. Like, I always tell Juan, like, I have a little like sensor now. Like, if I feel like I'm put in a corner and I just have to make a decision, or I just have to like decide my way out of it, like, I will just be like, you know what? No, I'm going to pause. Because sometimes people, life, haste can really get to me where I'm just like, okay, like, I'll just like make a choice, make a decision, like, just move on. But I try to like protect myself against that.
Why do you guys think that certain people find it difficult to find time to pray or read their Bible in a practical sense? Because I feel like there's thousands of excuses, but why do you think maybe like grind culture or whatever kind of stops people?
I think people just get so busy. Grind is all about, okay, I've done this, what can I do next? Or, when people are grinding, they're trying to get to the top, they're trying to achieve something physical, usually monetary value or something. They're working, they're like, I'm doing this so that I can do that. I'm working for this so that I can work here. It's just different things about, I'm doing this so I can get that. I think because a relationship with Jesus, time spent with Jesus, really does mean slowing down and allowing things to grow. And sometimes that growth takes time. And I think people just, again, want that instant gratification. And I think that's why Jesus tells us that patience is such a great and wonderful thing. I just don't think people have the patience, and they don't want to take that time. They don't want to take that time to slow down and just rest.
Well, why do you think people feel guilty resting, even if though it's a command, right, from God in Exodus, I believe, Exodus 28-11. Like, God commands us to rest, but I find so many Christians feeling guilty because they have so many things to do.
I think it's because people don't know how to rest. I think the definitions have been muddled because I feel like normally people feel guilty if, for example, you spent the whole afternoon watching Netflix, you were just scrolling, you were just doing like mindless tasks and putting it under the name of rest. And so I don't think people actually know how to rest and what is like truly restful for our souls. Because when for example, rest for me would be being in community at a Bible study or at a worship night, or like what Vic was saying, going on a walk or sitting down and praying. I've never once felt guilty about doing those things that are true rest for my soul. But I think there are all these counterfeit rests that we engage in that don't really do it for us. And then you feel guilty because we know this didn't really do it for me and I could have been doing other things. But never once have I read the Bible and been like, you know what, I could have been doing other things with this time. Like, never once. I don't know if you guys agree with that.
You know, I don't think there's ever been a time where I've put my phone on Do Not Disturb, read the Bible, or did a worship night and come out of that and been like, wow, I regret that. Or, ooh, should have spent a little less time. I think usually when I do those moments, because I'm so rested, I'm usually asking myself, when can I do this again?
I think a part of it has to do that for some people, it could be more effort. Because, Chris, what you said is true. Like watching Netflix, scrolling, you're just consuming, you're not using your brain. You're like detaching from the world, just like wasting your time. And reading your Bible, I'm not saying that it's a lot of work, but it does take a lot more energy, and to just sit down, find it, read it. And some people might just don't want to do any work at
And
all.
I think it's those disciplines too, right? Like you said, oh, I'll get to it. That's never going to happen. Like I'll get to it's never happen. I think you have to have like a discipline and a routine, not for it to be robotic, but for it to be a priority. And so you prioritize the things that you do. Like you set your alarm to go to work because it's a priority for you. You go to the grocery store because eating like your food and meal prepping, doing that is important, and so you make time for it and it doesn't just happen. Like you have to plan it out, you have to put it in your schedule, and that doesn't mean it's like not as important because you did that. And so I think in the same way we have to do that with our spiritual life and our spiritual health because it's just as important. I mean, even now there's so much research coming out just about your importance of spiritual health, even for people who aren't believers, right? And obviously they muddle that a little bit and make it something that it's not, but physical, emotional, mental, spiritual health is part of who we are. And so just like we take time to go to the gym, just like we take time to eat meal prepped foods and maybe go to therapy, whatever that looks like, in the same way, like going to the Lord and being cleansed and being at rest with him is so important. So something, I haven't been the best at this, but I've kind of been re-inspired through this conversation is kind of making little games for myself. Like I can't do this until I've done that. Like maybe I won't read some of my fiction books that I love to read until I've first like spent time with the Lord and read my Bible. And people can see that and think it's like legalistic or whatever. But if it works for you, it works for you. It's about, audience of one. It's your relationship with the Lord.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what really helps me to slow down, honestly, before, getting to that overwhelming state, I think a lot of times is just building that habit or routine. Sometimes I know that I'm not really slowing down or resting well when I've fallen out of that routine. I kind of think about the gym sometimes, like when you go to the gym so much that you hit this point that when you don't go to the gym, then you feel weird or like, oh man, like what am I doing? And I feel like that has to be like that rhythm in your life when it comes to Sabbath, prayer, rest, where you should do it so much that the day that you don't do it is the day that you feel like funny. Like you feel like, oh, I'm missing something out of my day because that's something that should be a part of your day all the time. How would you guys explain to a new believer or a non believer what does it mean to wait on the Lord?
Like my perspective is I feel like a lot of people want things like instantly, how we talked about in previous episodes. And faith is not really like that. And your relationship with the Lord isn't really like that. And it has a lot of patience that comes with it and just waiting. You could pray for something today and may not see the fruit of that for like another 10 years.
When I think of waiting on the Lord, I think of not trying to get ahead of God. Like I think so often people say like you're in a waiting season and then you try to like circumvent God's plan and God's timing because you want to get ahead of it and you're like, okay, well, like it hasn't reached this point yet, or I've waited for too long, even though like I know like I'm still in the waiting season, and you just get ahead of it. Or yeah, just
Like
getting in the
taking
way.
like taking control of the narrative versus just waiting for the Lord to take
Exactly.
the
You
wheel.
try to take control of the narrative because you're not exercising patience or trusting God that God's timing is best. And so you kind of try to get around that. And so I think waiting on the Lord is true surrender and true lordship, because you no longer believe that your way is better and your timing is better and that you know what's best for you. You truly believe that the Lord's timing is best, his ways are best, and he knows what's best for you. So you kind of relinquish that, like what you were saying, Tati, that worldly desire to like control. Because sometimes we tell God, like, I'm waiting on you, and then we're like, okay, you know what? And we just go with it. For those of you not watching and just listening, I was doing a bunch of hand gestures to try to explain myself.
Yeah, I guess I could give an example, like even my current circumstance of wanting to work full time and, being kind of some days frustrated financially. I've like learned to kind of let go and be like, well, at least I have finances and I feel like I'm getting kind of rest and kind of healing from some of the things that I have experienced, and having to force myself to unlearn things from my last experiences. Sometimes like it's always funny how maybe this is just a me thing, but you could pray for like, oh God, like I want a good position, but that position may not be in the same exact way that you thought or imagined. It's the way that God kind of planned it to be for us. And at that point, it's like, the patience and walking out in faith and saying, okay, like, I see what you're doing. I'll just keep walking and see what happens.
I don't know, as you were talking and we were talking, I kind of had this imagery. I don't know if it'll make sense, but it's almost like you're fishing and like you have your finger on the line. Say you're like, what is that called? Like fly fishing? Or I don't know what it is, but the fishing where you're just like holding it. And you guys can correct me out there, but that's the imagery in my head. Is like you're fishing and you throw your line in and you're just being like, okay, Lord, like tell me when to pull. If you pull too early, that's not going to be the fish that was meant for you. That's not going to be it. Like whether that's like job, person, relationship, friendship, thing, career, school, whatever that is, it's not going to be for you if it's not, you know, if you didn't like properly like wait on the Lord. And so I think in the same way, like being attuned to like, okay, Lord, when show me your voice and how you're going to speak to me, because maybe sometimes the lack of confidence we have in God and the lack of confidence we have in waiting on the Lord is really that we don't know his voice. So I think with that, just what we want to encourage everyone in is busyness is not a sign of holiness. Like holiness is spending time with the Lord and not like busying our minds. So whatever that looks like for you guys, taking a couple minutes, maybe like 15 minutes, just really dedicating to the Lord, maybe journaling, whatever that looks like. Maybe that's a rhythm that we can all start together in the coming weeks. And then also, stillness is not wasted time. Like maybe we need to rewire our thoughts, but it's never wasted time, and it's always life-giving, and it always fills us up. As always, we're going to transition to one of our favorite times of the podcast episode, which is hot take time with Tati. And we encourage you guys to follow along and let us know what your opinions are on these topics, because really, you're one of us.
I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I don't think we've done a hot take on church sizes. So
Oof.
the way that I kind of wrote it, we could always reword it if you guys like, but you know that you're in a good sized church when the pastor knows your name.
That's okay. Is it the main pastor or just a pastor?
The main pastor. Like if the main pastor, it's hard to see them or talk to them and they don't know you, it's too big of a church.
I don't think there's such a thing as too big of a church, but I would say that that's probably the church you should be attending.
So you don't think the mega churches is too big of a church where they have like security for the pastor and you can't even talk to them?
It depends. I had this interesting conversation at work today where there was a pastor from a local church who he wanted his own private room to receive some medication. And the doctor said, no, you can't have a private room because you're just a normal person. But that guy desperately wanted a private room because he was saying that if he was seen by anybody, it would tarnish his image, which made me think of our pastors just like glorified celebrities. But, Tati, I changed my mind. I concede this point. I think you should go to a church where your pastor knows you by name.
I think it's a hard expectation to have on a pastor. I do think it's possible, but I do think it involves your work. right? If you show up and you leave, the pastor's not going to know who you are.
Oh no, of
Two-way
course.
street,
He's
two-way
not.
street.
But I guess it's one of those things like you have the opportunity, because I feel like
Yeah.
the church I was going to, it's a pretty big church. I mean, you guys went, and the pastor knew who I was, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, what would be
And
the
he was
equivalent of the
intentional.
other way around? Like if everybody knows your name?
Like too small.
Yeah, like what's the
If everybody knows all your tea, then it's too small of a church.
Yep.
If it's no, why? There's home
Everyone
churches.
should know
People have
your
churches
tea.
in their home, and there's like 10 people.
I think this is a trick question. I don't think no church could be too small.
If I openly share it, that's fine. But if I share with one
Yes.
person and then all the other ones are knowing, I'm like not too crazy about that. To answer your question, I'm not going to hold it against the pastor, because who knows whether it's like a good sized church, it's not moderate. Sometimes it can be a lot for pastors to try and also remember everyone's name or everyone he's been introduced to. And maybe if he's met you multiple times, then he should probably know your name. But if he's met you like once or twice, I would cut the guy a little bit of slack.
I guess the question meant like if you can actually meet the pastor and he can remember your name, not like if he actually knows your name.
If
Because we've been to churches where they probably
I think what
don't
you're
even
saying
know
is
our
if like
names.
if
Yeah.
the pastor's basically a celebrity or has, because I think it's fine to have church security, but if the pastor is like to the point where like he's like, I don't know, there's
Has a private jet.
okay, that's way too far. I
he's
don't.
Do you
doing a
think
little
they
too
ha-
much.
Do you think they have security because they have money, or why else? Or just because they're
I feel
super
like
well known, or why?
the television people who are like
Televangelists.
the televangelists that are, I mean, the ones that are obviously like spouting heresy or blasphemy, I think they have security because they have a lot of money and they know people might go crazy on them because they're spreading lies.
And I think a lot of people are just, some people are just straight up crazy. And I think they know that if they go after the leader, the shepherd of the, of the church, the congregation, that if they were to take him out, then they know that all these people would probably disperse.
Yeah, so security is fine. Security is fine.
I think having security at the church is fine. I mean,
I think
the
what
world
Tati's
is
saying is
scary.
like
I
if you
think you're
can't
talking
even
about
meet your
approachable.
pastor, yeah, like if you can't even meet your
Yes.
pastor, then maybe it's not. I would argue that's not even a church then, because isn't the responsibility of the
why-
pastor is to lead the flock of their church?
I see that, but I'm also like, why does the pastor need to know? Like, are you having Bible study with the pastor? Like, I think it's more like you need to have a community at that church, whatever that looks like. I'm sure even these mega churches have
That's
like
why I said
a
in the beginning,
bazillion
if
small groups.
that's why I said in the beginning, like, do you mean the main pastor or a pastor? Because I feel like at least a pastor should know you really well because they should be in some form of ministry, whether you're a young adult and like there's a young adults pastor or like an outreach pastor, or you're like in high school and there's like a youth leader who is super involved and they're your connection. Like there should be some form of, I guess, accountability and connection there between you as a churchgoer and the leadership at the church. And ultimately that should blossom into this quote unquote partnership where you are also serving at the church.
Do you feel like welcome teams are worth it, or do you think it can be kind of like a waste?
Oof, I had this really big conversation with someone back home in Reno who does like kind of church leadership. And we talked about welcome teams because I felt in the beginning that they're worthless because it kind of felt like, that guy who has like that flippy sign and he's just like flipping his sign on the side of the street. Like,
Yes.
like some people are entertaining and like get my attention, but it's kind of like I don't feel like it does anything for me. But what the reason why they're there is because they're trying to make people feel welcome. Like that's the whole goal.
Imagine, okay, so our church is in a cafeteria, so I know it's a little bit different. So you like walk into the school and then you walk like into the courtyard and then you walk into the cafeteria in the church. Imagine doing that in straight up silence. Like how many people would turn back and go to their cars? Like
But we do everything else in
Well,
silence.
I would say
We go to the
this. I would
grocery
say this.
store in
If
silence,
you're,
go to
I
work.
think welcome teams are starting to be more like, I don't know what the right word is, but they're getting so like uniform in the way that people just say like, hi, good morning, but they're not actually welcoming you, if that makes sense. Maybe some of that needs to be like addressed. But for me, like, I'll tell you honest, like, not trying to be that guy who always criticizes things, but I think 9 times out of 10 when people come to church, they are not mentioning the welcome team. Like, that stood out.
But you know what? A pastor came to our church recently and guest spoke, and he talked about how one of the most impactful things for him walking into our church was the welcome team and just how welcoming and
Yeah, I'm not
just
saying that it's bad.
pure
I'm just
and
saying like
loving
you
that
need to
is.
have, it's just hard
Yeah.
because a welcome
It's
team, yeah.
forced. It's
Well,
forced. And you're not building, well, most of the time, at least from my experience, I don't build relationships with those people.
I feel like everyone on the welcome team in any church needs to read this book called The Six Conversations. I just read like a handful of pages once with Crystal, and literally it was so like life-giving because it was about how Christians need to interact more spiritually and in a deeper sense than just saying like I'll pray for you, hey. Because I feel like there are people on the welcome team who genuinely ask the follow-up question, right? Like, how was your week been? Good. What was good about it? You know what I mean? Like, just saying that follow-up question, it makes such a huge impact.
Everyone, we have reached the end of our episode. It was a wonderful time. We loved having these questions and answering these questions and hoping that we can just encourage you in this way. So if you made it to the end of the episode, awesome. And if you have something to say or a comment that needs to be made, please, by all means, put it in the comments below and also join our Discord because that is a really intentional community that we have for you guys to engage with us and other people who are looking to be one of us. So please put something down below and come join our community. But anyway, we love you guys and hope you have an amazing and wonderful week. Bye.